Alright guys, this is going to be a really quick comparison between the OnePlus 3 and the Nexus 6P, two phones that I thought were going to be completely different ends of the scale. Now I have recorded this video about 4 times, my computer's crashed while editing it, so I'm going to go through it again and try and do it as quickly as possible. Firstly, the OnePlus 3 brand new is about £340 now, and this is due to the Brexit thing. I'm not going to go into that. The 6P, you can get a used one for around the same price, maybe a little bit more expensive if you want to go for a really high quality one, especially if you're going into the higher storage options. So firstly, I'm going to get into the build quality. The build quality of these phones are absolutely stellar. They're using full metal construction, they got Gorilla Glass 4 on the front, and with the 6P you've actually got a glass visor at the back, which is a little bit different. You know, you can't really replicate the design of that phone quite easily without there being some kind of lawsuit. Whereas the OnePlus 3 looks a lot like the Huawei Mate 7. It's also been apparently closely linked to an HTC phone and an iPhone, which I still don't get how it looks anything like an iPhone, but there we go. I think it looks a lot like a Huawei Mate 7. Anyway, the build quality is stellar and you're going to love it. I would recommend putting cases on both because they are very, very fragile, kind of metal, going to scratch quite easily phones. There's a camera bump on the OnePlus 3, and then on the 6P you've kind of got a visor bump where it kind of comes up, so yeah, just be aware of that. So these phones were both released at different times. The OnePlus 3 came out literally last month, of June of 2016, and then you've got the Huawei 6P, which came out in September of last year, 2015. So there's a whole new chipset and stuff like that. For displays, we've got a 5.5 inch 1080p AMOLED display on the OnePlus 3, which is the newer one, and then we've got a 1440p 5.7 inch display on the Huawei 6P, which is something different. You know, you expect a more high-end screen to go on a newer phone. I actually prefer the screen on the 6P just because it's like a higher pixel density. Obviously, you're going, you know, a much larger resolution in almost the same screen size. It's also a bigger screen, only by a little bit, but it does make the difference. And I can tell you that although I prefer the feel in the hand of the OnePlus 3 for its screen, because there's a too tall chin and forehead on the 6P, I do prefer the screen on the 6P because it's a higher pixel density. That is not at all linked to battery life though. For the OSs, we're running Android 6 Marshmallow on the 6P, which is a pure stock Android, and you will be able to upgrade this to the newest OSs for probably the next 2 or 3 years. And then on the OnePlus 3, we're running Oxygen OS, which is based on Android on Marshmallow, and you will probably be able to upgrade that too. With the custom ROMs and custom installations and stuff, you do tend to be able to use the newer applications and the newer operating systems for a long time after the phone's release. Okay, for CPUs, on the Huawei 6P we've got an 8-core chip that's lower clocked quad-core and a higher clocked quad-core in the form of the Snapdragon 810, quite a legendary chip. And then on the OnePlus 3 we've got a quad-core which is comprised of a dual-core and a higher-end dual-core in the form of a Qualcomm Snapdragon 820, which is a much newer chip. It's like the newer version of the 810. It's a quad-core because I believe it's more efficient. You know, it comes out in higher scores on benchmarks and stuff. And I believe this is, you know, even though it has half the amount of cores, it's just way more efficient. And then for RAM, we're rocking 6 gigs of RAM on the OnePlus 3 with 64 gigabytes of onboard storage. That's the only option you have at the moment. And then on the Huawei 6P, you have 32 gigs, 64 gigs, and 128 gigs of onboard memory, onboard storage, but you also only have the option of 3 gigabytes of RAM. Now, between the two, I can't tell a difference in multitasking. When I open up other apps and then come back to other apps, I don't know if that's just Oxygen OS doing its thing, but it never keeps it in RAM. And then cameras, we're going to go straight into the cameras now. We've got a 12 megapixel camera on the 6P, which is an amazing camera. You know, you're able to do 4K at 30 FPS, 720p at 240 FPS, which I like because I like the higher frame rate stuff. And then at the front camera, you've got an 8 megapixel shooter capable of shooting 1080p at 30 FPS. An absolutely great front-facing camera, by the way. On the OnePlus 3, which is the newer device, you've got a 16 megapixel sensor, which again, I'm sorry for the review that I did and I said that it's got a 12 megapixel sensor. It's 16 megapixels. You've also apparently got face detection autofocus, which is pretty cool. The autofocus is a little bit jittery, especially with video, and then that's also capable of shooting 4K at 30 FPS, 720p at 120 FPS, so half the frame rate, which is a bit upsetting. And then the front camera is an 8 megapixel sensor again, capable of shooting 1080p at 30 FPS. I do like the front-facing cameras on both of these. I can't really pick between them, but on the rear cameras I'd have to go with the 6P just because it's better in low light and it does tend to kind of work better and the video is much better. Whereas with the OnePlus 3 you're getting, you know, a more croppable image. You can zoom in without losing all that detail. It does tend to over-sharpen a little bit, but I mean that's kind of the perks of of being, you're able to zoom in and it kind of retain detail. Now for onboard speakers, this is kind of no-brainer. The 6P has front-firing stereo speakers, and the OnePlus 3 has a fairly decently bad but bottom-mounted speaker, almost like the iPhones and the Samsungs. So I would definitely go with the 6P if you want kind of a speaker that you could almost use as a mini Bluetooth speaker, because it's kind of got the quality of a low-end Bluetooth speaker, which is awesome. It means you don't have to connect anything to your phone, whether it's wirelessly or just wired overall. And then we do have the connectors, which are USB Type-C. Obviously, both of these using Type-C. The headphone jack is on the bottom on the OnePlus 3 and on the top on the 6P. I do prefer the 6P's version of doing things because I do tend to put my phone in kind of up, if that makes any sense. Not sure why, just always have done it. So yeah, sorry about that to any, it actually does make more sense to put it in the OnePlus 3's way and have the phone facing down, but I don't know, I just tend to have always put it upwards, so yeah. Then for batteries, we're going with 3,450 milliamp hours in the 6P, and then a smaller 3,000 milliamp hour battery in the OnePlus 3. Now battery life, I managed to get about a day out of both of these. I believe the OnePlus 3 just worked a little bit better at getting me through a full day. I'm not sure if that's kind of the combination of apps I used or how much I used it. I do tend to use phones all around the same amount, but either way, the OnePlus 3 just edged it for me, even though it's got a smaller battery. Not sure if that's to do with Oxygen OS and its efficiency, but there we go. And the fingerprint scanners, this is something that is basically the last thing I'm going to talk about, because although I could have gone into way more detail, these are the kind of the main things I need to focus on. The fingerprint scanner is pretty awesome. On the OnePlus 3, it is blisteringly fast. In fact, I'd say it's probably the fastest of any phone that I have ever tested. That includes the 6S Plus and the 6P. But it's in an awkward position. I don't necessarily like using my thumb. I'd much prefer it being on the back, which switches over to the Huawei's, which has a slightly slower fingerprint scanner. I say slightly slower, it's a little bit slower, but that's cool because it's in the right position. I do prefer having the fingerprint scanner on the back. It just makes so much more sense for me, and I absolutely love it there. So I actually prefer the scanner on the 6P, but it's definitely faster on the OnePlus 3. So, I mean, whichever you want, I guess. If you're an iPhone user or a Samsung user and you're used to having the fingerprint scanner on the front, then by all means go with the OnePlus 3 because it is insanely quick. I could have gone into way more things like, the screen to body ratio or the fast charging capabilities or the NFC capabilities and stuff like that. But I'm not going to, because I'm going to end this video right here. I'm really sorry, I made this video like several times and my computer's crashed and I just want to redo it again. And overall, which one would I pick? Well, I would certainly go for the OnePlus 3 actually. It's a bit newer, so obviously you're getting that kind of longer lifespan naturally. Because it's running Oxygen OS, you get an even longer lifespan because it's able to basically update to the newest OSs. Although you could do that with custom ROMs on the 6P. And also, I just like the feel of it in the hand. I really do like the feel of it in the hand. Not that I don't about the 6P, but it's a little bit bigger, a little bit chunkier. So, you're not going to go wrong with either of these phones. They're absolutely stellar. The 6P was something I was way more excited for and it turned out not as good. Whereas the OnePlus 3 came, I wasn't as excited, but it turned out way better than I thought it was going to be. So there we go. That kind of gives you a little bit of a verdict. Thanks for watching, guys. Videos will probably go down to one a week now. So what I'm going to do is upload on a Friday of every week. So you will get this video, which is Mondays, and then you'll also get a video on Friday. It will be going down to one video a week, guys. I'm sorry, but the technical difficulties are just way out of my hands. So thanks for watching, guys. It's been your brother, Ryan Thomas, and I'll see you on the next one. Peace.